If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankie'sPod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting. Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, I'm talking to Sally Orange. A lot of people probably don't know who Sally is, but once you've looked her up and heard this podcast, I think you're going to be very impressed. Hi, Sally. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. And you?
Yeah, I'm brilliant. Again, thanks for doing this and agreeing to come on the show.
No problem. No,
it's
looking forward to it.
It's just the normal questions that I normally ask people. So it's where did you grow up? Why did you join the military? What did you do while you were in? Any stories and stuff from that as well. Why did you leave? And what have you done since and how it's affected your life and everything like that. So if you just want to go over where you grew up and why did you join the military?
Yeah, so I grew up in Stafford, in Staffordshire. Not that many people know where it is. It's in between Birmingham and Manchester, is what I tend to tell people. Fairly normal upbringing. I was, if there's anything such as normal, one of four. I've got an older brother and two younger sisters. And just went to the local comprehensive school, and was a bit of a mediocre kind of at school, really. But I struggled. I struggled at school academically. I'd work hard, but as soon as someone told me that it was an exam, I just gave that word exam, I would go to pieces. So I didn't do too bad with my GCSEs, but then it came to my A levels, and unfortunately I broke my leg just before actually taking my A levels. So I'd had nearly a year off. It was quite a serious break, and I had to have metal work, and I was in hospital for over a month with that. And actually, while I was in hospital, my boyfriend at the time went off with one of my really good friends. So it wasn't the best time of my life. But what it did do is it made me realise exactly what I wanted to do. So I knew from that I wanted to be a physiotherapist. And I knew that I had to get certain grades with my A levels. So unfortunately, I didn't actually get those grades, but I was still really determined to become a physio. So I resat my A levels, but unfortunately this time did even worse than the first time. But I had worked out by this point that my A levels spelt U-dunce, which I thought was quite ingenious to work out. Still wasn't good enough for me to get onto a physio degree, but it was good enough for me to go to university. So I thought I'd go and do radiography. I thought that's similar to physio. Turns out it isn't similar at all. And while I was there, I thought, no, I definitely want to do physio. So I dropped out of that course, and within the same year, managed to get on to a health studies course. And every year of that degree, I applied for physio, thinking, I can transfer to it because it's at the same university. But unfortunately, that didn't happen either. So I ended up doing that first degree, first 3 years, and then having a year out and applying again, and finally getting a place in 1997. So I'd first applied in 1991, and 6 years later, finally got onto the course that I actually wanted to do. So
stubborn then.
Another 3 years study. So that was 9 years after first applying. So quite a journey to get to where I wanted to be. But that sort of took me from Stafford to, first of all, I went to Birmingham, and Birmingham University, that's the one I dropped out of. Then I went to Leeds, had 3 years there, and then finally went to Nottingham and did my physio there. So that sort of quite quickly took me away from Stafford and got me doing what I wanted to do. And it was while I was at university in Nottingham that I found out about the university's officers training corps. And I didn't know anything about the army before. I'm not from a background nobody in my family has been in the forces at all, so I didn't know anything at all. And yeah, I found out about it and thought, well, this is great. I can go on a Wednesday afternoon and I can get paid for going and doing this training, and I can go skiing and get to do all these different things. And that was the start of me joining the army, really.
I mean, I've had nothing to do with the UOTC. I know guys have served with them as their like instructors and all that. Is it like the TA, or is it like the reservists now? And it can't say TA anymore. Is it like the reservists, or is it just like an upskilled cadets?
Yeah, I mean, I was never a cadet. I was born in a time where females weren't allowed into cadets, so it was nothing that I knew about. And I didn't know, as I said, I didn't know anything about the army. I actually did join the reserves, the TA as it was then, to begin with, because I was too late for the applying for the intake of the officers training corps. But I would say, really, it is kind of like an upskilled cadet, because you can all well, you're officer cadets, aren't you? You all join as at the same time, whereas in the reserves, or as the TA, as I say, you've got people coming in at different times. So I joined the field hospital, and so literally on a Tuesday night I was a private, but on a Wednesday night I was an officer cadet. So people would say, "What rank are you?" And I'd say, "Well, it depends what day of the week it is, really." And so I wasn't very good at all because I just didn't have that background of knowing much about it. And I think I look like a rabbit in the headlights for most of the time with the things that I was doing. But I think the support and the camaraderie and the things that you got to do was what I really enjoyed, and still in contact with some of those people now, years and years later.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you're a TA and a private officer. That's like kind of cool in a way, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of almost transferred to the officers training corps, but I could still go along to some of the training, some of the drill nights of the TA, which was a medical corps. So at university, I did do physiotherapy, and I did finally graduate as a physio. And then actually 4 years after I graduated, I didn't join the regular army, but I was full time within the reserve. So I was full time reserve service for 7 years. So altogether, I ended up serving 22 years, 7 of which were full time. But I spent virtually every weekend, doing what I could, and doing either adventure training or going on exercise with the field hospital, and did a tour of Afghanistan as well, back in 2010. So that was quite interesting within the field hospital.
So with FTRS serving with the field hospital units and stuff like that, how did the regular soldiers treat you?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because in actual fact, as a professional, as a physiotherapist in uniform, you couldn't tell, you don't know the difference between a reservist or a regular.
Yeah.
And I was actually treating reservists who'd come back from Iraq or Afghanistan who had been injured, and it was getting them back to, it was still back in the UK, but it was getting them back to the sort of being a rehab centre that could then get them back to how they were given to the army in the first place, to make sure that they got back.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
So
you can't put it out if it's still broken. It needs fixing.
Exactly. Yeah. We sort of do our best so that people would go back to their civilian jobs as they arrived into the army, as it was. And I think maybe it was slightly different being a professionally qualified officer and being a physio. You'd done your training before you actually joined the army, and in some ways it was quite hard, because the expectations were that you'd had exactly the same training as an officer of of another course.
Have another cap badge,
Yeah.
So did you go Sandhurst as well? So
yeah. So did a much shorter course.
So,
And again, it wasn't the 44 weeks, but again, there was still the expectation that you knew, a lot of those stuff, the leadership and development, which you hadn't really had a huge amount of that.
And I suppose really in the job you were doing, you don't really need it.
To some degree.
To a degree, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say almost it almost went not against you, but sort of sometimes I wanted to almost turn the rank slide round, because the job that I was doing, exactly as you say, you want people to be people. You don't want them to be scared because of your rank, or not tell you things because of a certain rank, because that goes against what you're going to be able to help them with. And if you get people come in and they're sort of stood up straight, and if that's causing them their problem, and I would want to see what it was that caused their problem. Sometimes I did feel like I just wanted to take off the rank slide and just be Sally, so that I could get the most out of the patients.
I mean, I suppose that's quite hard, like for a young Tom coming in or something like that. He's also, I mean, not just young Tom, but old guys like me towards the end of my career. I'd be wary of admitting everything that's wrong in case medical discharge or something like that, or even the stigma of being called a biff.
Yeah.
Which I have had that stigma for many years, so I don't care really. But yeah, so people will try and hide their own injuries and stuff like that, and I imagine it is quite hard to get it out to them, especially not just with the rank structure.
But sort of experience you can tease it out of people through experience, and I think maybe that's where the leadership was slightly different, in that you were sort of bringing out you were still bringing out the best in people, but in a way that they would confide in you and feel comfortable to be able to talk about what their injuries were. Because also what I found was, very often with a physical injury, there is a lot of other stuff going on mentally, and not helped by the things that people are called. I mean, some people were lazy. I'm not gonna lie with that. Some people were, but some people were injured and not able to. The majority of people were injured and not able to do what they needed to do, and that was really difficult. I think anyone who knows that when you're not physically capable of doing what you normally do, whether that be, whether it be your little finger, and you suddenly can't open jars or you can't open doors, it's frustrating. It gets annoying, and that's something really, really small. So if it is something like a knee or a backs are really difficult because you can't see them, and so and quite often they would feel okay for some things and not for other things. And there'd be a lot of guys who would feel that they should, and I use the should in inverted commas, be able to do this and be able to do that. And if they're big guys, they're often relied on to do the heavy lifting. So for them to suddenly say, "Oh, but my back's not great," it is hard. And there is quite a lot of stigma that comes with that. Which has an impact on somebody emotionally, especially if that's what they really want to be able to do and they can't do it. It can be quite complex and quite tricky, because sometimes there's fear that people don't want to do something because of fear of getting the pain worse, and by sort of holding yourself and not doing things, it can make things worse, because movement is good. As long as it's the right movement. So it's a lot of educating people about injuries and what it will or won't allow them to do. And I think being open and honest with people was really important, as you say, so that they don't think I'm going to be be downgraded or not going to be.
I mean, I've seen that many people throughout the years. I mean, that was I did 27 years in the end. The amount of people I've seen almost cripple themselves because they wouldn't go sick. They didn't want to get the stigma of being on light duties or downgraded, and it's ruined their lives almost. It was you'd have to like force them to go sometimes. And I mean, when I first joined it, and I joined like 1985, to go sick in my unit then, you had to take your number twos, overnight wash bag, just because you had the flu, or you twisted your ankle or something like that. But it was to put people off going to the med centre, and it did that. So there'll be people out there who've got injuries for life that they didn't want to, they didn't want to go to the med centre, and the army was, in fact, it was the army that was actively discouraging people to seek treatment because
I think it had.
It was looked down on.
It has changed.
It has changed, yeah.
Certainly physiotherapy was something that didn't exist to begin with, but is then recognised that actually, if you can prevent people getting injuries, or if you can help them quickly after they've had the injury, then they won't develop bad habits, and they will be able to get back and do things, quite quickly.
I mean, it has changed a lot. I mean, in my time, I wouldn't like to guess what it's like now. I mean, I hear stories about the modern army, let's call it, and it's a bit different than what it was when I left, even 10 years ago, and I haven't got a clue what's going on with it anymore. So what was the next step for you then after that? So you mentioned you did a tour of Afghan.
So that was 2010, as I say, in the field hospital, and I was actually the first OC that was a reservist. Even though I was a full-time reserve service, I was, still a reservist, which caused a few problems with some people because I wasn't a regular, even though I'd actually been in longer than they had. I'd been full-time longer than they'd been in the army. So it did have its challenges. But I think not particularly from a patient point of view, because they just recognised they were getting to see a physio, and so that could help them and could get them back to the either back to the faults or prevent them from having to go home. Then that was all a good thing.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, what people will do not to get sent home. And it's you're falling to bits, mate. Oh, I'm all right, I'm fine. I want to get back out there with the lads.
Yeah, and
type of thing.
That was quite, sometimes quite difficult in having to sort of explain to people the impact that them having that injury could have on the rest of the team, because and almost having to say to them, how would you feel if somebody else was seriously injured or worse still killed because you weren't able to do your job, and have to put it in that way rather than saying, we'll let you go out there and do it, because that is going to be so much worse, and the guilt that you're going to feel if that is the scenario. Whereas come and see us, we can help you, we can get you back to full fitness, then you can go back out and do the job that you were doing before without any concerns. And so it was quite complex sometimes having to get that through to people.
Yeah, I can imagine, because they're stubborn, aren't they? Squaddies, they're really stubborn.
Yes, there can be a habit with that.
So how would you deal with, like, I don't know how to explain it. So you've got someone who's come in with an injury and he doesn't want to be there. He wants to get back out on the ground, or he wants to get back to his unit, and he's just and he's been stroppy, and I wouldn't say aggressive, but I imagine you've come across that as well, where people just don't want to, get the treatment and want to be out of there. How would you deal with that? Did you get any of that?
Not really, because I think once they had got to us and, we'd sort of do an assessment and just explain to them exactly what it was that we could do to help them. And actually the more that they put in and listen to us, the problem would be is they would want to do too much, because sometimes people would think, if I do a lot now, the more I do, the quicker I'll get better, and that isn't necessarily the case. And so it was having to almost put reins on people and sort of hold them back and say, you're doing great, this is your time scale of this is what we can expect, this is how long we think you'll need to be back here. And this was in Bastion, so it wasn't as though they weren't still in an operational theatre, but they were just on a on a rehab course we were able to sort of keep them for two to 3 weeks, for them to be able to really sort of concentrate on themselves. And I think as long as you were just honest and gave realistic expectations and sort of goals of what they need to achieve, and if they weren't able to meet them, then reevaluate and say, look, what do you think? It was very much guided by them as well. What do you think that you can do? And rather than saying, right, your ankle's fixed, off you go back to the fobs, we'd set up sort of rehab courses and obstacles where it would be uneven ground, and we would take them outside with heavy weight on so that they would feel whether or not they could do it. And if they can't, then more often than not, people would, it's obvious. They say, oh, I can't do it.
Yeah, no, that's quite clever. That you've just reminded me of something. So years ago, I suffered compartment syndrome in both legs, and it went on for like 10 years. And it was just a case of, right, light duties for a couple of weeks, lose some weight, you'll be all right. And I ended up with hernia in my legs, so they had to cut the sheaths and sort me out that way. And I remember going back to the physio afterwards, and he looked at me and he just went, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do here." And I was like, "What?" And it was what he said to us. He goes, "You're just one of them people, and the technical term is you've got snooker table legs. There's nothing we can do to change him." So he just sent me packing. And he was right. There was nothing he could do. So little short, fat, stumpy legs. Yeah. So the other thing that you're quite famous for is all the marathons and the adventures that you've had. Let's say, how did you start getting into that?
Yeah. So I suppose a big chunk that we've sort of skipped over is why.
Sorry.
No, not at all. It's sort of in the military. Is that I was helping a lot of other people, but I wasn't helping myself. And I actually struggled myself for probably over 20 years with really quite severe depression and anxiety. And I hid it. I didn't tell anyone. And I didn't help myself by not telling anyone, but it was that old, I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to get medically discharged. I didn't want there to seem that there was a weakness or anything like that. Previously I'd spoke to people and said, "Oh, if you say that you've got depression, you'll never get a job." That was when I was younger, and it was just something that you didn't talk about. You didn't want anyone to know. So I kind of suffered in silence, but looking back, it was probably quite obvious to some people. And it got very, very serious, and it got to the point where I couldn't see a reason for me on this earth. I just thought the world would be much better off without me, because people wouldn't have to worry about me. They wouldn't have to, be checking up on me. And I sort of had to come under the care of the crisis team. And it was at that point that I needed to get help, because it very nearly wasn't an option to be able to get help. But then I sort of found that running, or just getting outside initially, I can't say it initially started with going and running a long way. I ran when I was at school till I was 16, till I broke my leg. But then I didn't run again till I was 34. So I had a long time where I didn't do any running at all. And that's when I thought maybe I could see about doing the London Marathon. I remember watching it when I was a little girl and thinking, wow, that looks amazing. I'd love to do that one day. It just took me until I was 34 to actually pluck up the courage and think that I could do that, because I just had this, I'm not good enough. I would never be able to do something like that. It was just something that was not even on my radar to be able to achieve. And the first marathon that I ever did, I did it dressed as Supergirl, so dressed as a superhero. And can honestly say that when I crossed that finish line, probably for the first time in my life, I felt like a superhero and got the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon dressed as a superhero.
I didn't know there was one.
Yeah.
There is now.
It has been beaten. It has been beaten now.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you just said there about the depression, and I was going to try and come back to that. I wasn't going to ignore it. It's something you said there about feeling as though you know the world would be a better place without you and stuff like that. And I suppose for people like me who've never really suffered depression, not that I think I have anyway, I'm not doing these podcasts has made me discover other things about myself but I've never been to that level. I've been ups and downs. Recently, if things have changed, when things change in your life, sometimes it can cause upheavals in your brain type of thing, and it takes a while to get around with them. But I've never been at that level. I have friends who have, and they didn't get the help, and they're no longer with us. That's terrible. But I think it's hard for someone who's never suffered any mental health issues to understand how somebody could actually feel that way. It's an alien thought process to think for someone who's not depressed to think that why did they do that? They made it, but you to have that feeling where you don't need to be here anymore.
Yeah,
the world would be better.
I remember thinking that I wished I'd not come back from Afghanistan, because that way my brain wouldn't have to be really, really trying hard. And loved ones at home, although the outcome is very different, the outcome is exactly the same, the reasoning behind it wouldn't be loved ones at home sort of beating themselves up, wondering if there was anything else that they could have done. So it was something that I would just think, I just wish that I hadn't come back. And I know that might sound strange, but it just it's almost like the kind of way to family and friends, knowing that you were out there and that was a possibility. And for a long time, I just wish that that would have been an almost kinder way.
Yeah, that's So your mind at the time, it was going to be something will happen. I'm not coming back. It's going to be kinder for my family because they're not going to think that that the worst could have happened. And it's oh, wow, that must have been still terrible. Going on in your head.
Yeah, it's obviously they would still go through grief and the bereavement, but it wouldn't have been a what if situation. I'm sure there would have been, but it's just a different. It's an expectation when you're in an operational theatre that could happen.
That could happen, yeah. So, if you don't mind me asking, or if it's not too personal a question, do you know what caused the depression, or was it just the way your brain's wired?
Yeah, I think I was always a worrier. So anxiety has always been something I lived with. I'm 6 years old. I remember sort of, worrying what if, my mum wasn't back home somewhere. I'd think she'd had a car crash, and that was a really young age that I was, really worried about it. But it just got called a worrier. And then, just often feeling that I wasn't good enough at anything. And there wasn't one sort of incident. It was an accumulative effect of lots and lots of things over time. And I'd get called sensitive, and I am sensitive. And for a long time, I saw that as a real weakness. But then I actually realised that the job that I was doing, I kind of needed to be sensitive to other people, because that way I could read if they were struggling or not. It's just that I'm also sensitive to what people say to me, and I'm not sort of. Well, it's funny. It depends. I remember a training officer saying to me that, "Well, you're not very resilient, are you?" And I'd just come back from doing the marathon des Sables, which is 6 marathons in 7 days. And so it depends how you measure resilience, because that was tough. Getting up every day and doing a marathon in the Sahara Desert whilst carrying all your own kit, and in those temperatures, you needed to be able, you went through hardship then, but yeah, if somebody's going to be unpleasant to me, I didn't take well to that, and I wasn't very resilient to that. So I think resilience is different. There's different ways of being resilient, and I think maybe I'm not as emotionally resilient because things affect me and I get upset. Yeah.
So you've got a lot of empathy for people as well.
Yes, yeah, and I'm not sure if you can have. I'm not sure if you could have the two. If you're very hard faced and nothing bothers you, then it's very hard to be empathetic to other people. But the result being that I get upset and quite sensitive if people say things. So my emotional resilience maybe wasn't so great. But I've been able to achieve, and I didn't need people knocking me down. Rather than, I'm one of those people that doesn't respond well to negative. Some people, if you get told, "Oh, you're not very good at this," well, I'll show them, and they'll go and do, make sure that they'll do it. Whereas if I get told I'm not very good, well, obviously I'm not very good at that. They think I'm not very good at that, and so didn't have that sort of inner self belief, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of. Yeah, I know what you mean. The self-confidence side can get knocked out here on certain occasions, and it's hard to get it back.
I don't think it was
like
there
really
to
hard to get
begin
it back.
with for a lot of the time, and that's something with young people now that I'm very keen to instill in young people, that they do have confidence and they can see what they can achieve. There's always people and things that we can do really well. There's things that we're not so good at, and we either need to practice, or sometimes we are just not very good at certain things.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have a teacher at school who used to say, "Look, you can't be great at everything, but you will be really good at one thing, and that might be only that one thing. So just run with it, take it, excel at that. You can't be all and be everything for everyone.
Yeah,
you just can't. It's impossible. You know what I mean?"
And I think
so
it's that kind of
sorry,
thing that would, I often try too hard to please people, and then I would get upset if they weren't either grateful for that, or if they, but then I have to think not everybody likes everything. It's the Marmite thing, isn't it? You either love it or you hate it. And if you can say to someone, but why don't you like it? I just don't. And some people are like that. There are some people we just don't like, and however much you try to be something different, they're just not going to like you. You might remind them of somebody else, or you might have a similarity to something that they'll instantly take a dislike to.
So you started doing the marathons for charities then. Which charity did you pick first?
The very first charity was actually the Outward Bound Trust. I did an Outward Bound course when I was younger, and I think at the time they were one of the charities that you didn't have to raise quite as much money for. So I was like, right, I only have to raise I think it was £1,500 at the time, but I just was not from a family that thought that I would ever be able to raise £1,500. And I did end up raising, I think it was about 7 for the very first one I did. But I was doing, every lunchtime, I was doing sponsored massages, sort of after work, I was doing sponsored I was doing Pilates courses, and, lots of sort of things to try, because I always feel with donations and sponsorships, I like to be able to give something to an individual. So it might be a raffle, so they've got the opportunity of potentially winning. Or I went through a stage of making greeting cards, so people would buy them, and then they've got something for their money. And often they were the type of cards that I would have liked to have received when I wasn't very well. So again, I suppose it's the empath in me that would be able to think this would be a nice card to receive, because if you're feeling like this, then it shows that somebody's thought about you.
I'd imagine a couple of them may have been a bit cheeky.
Say again, sorry.
I said, I imagine a couple of them might have been a bit cheeky.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So what was that? Was that a London marathon you were doing at the time?
Yeah, the very first marathon I did was the London Marathon. And then,
Oh, yeah.
as I say, I felt like a superhero as across the line. But then after that, I thought, never again. But then soon it creeped back in and thought, well, maybe I could do it again. But I'm going to have to raise more, I'm going to have to try and raise money again. And I'd already raised a lot. So I was like, what can I do and how can I make it different? So I thought, my surname's Orange. I'll dress as an orange. So I got this great big costume that, when I think back to it, it was a hot day and it was this fur kind of costume, this orange ball. And yeah, but on that one, managed to get the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon dressed as a piece of fruit. So that was quite juicy, that one. And I think and actually it was during that marathon, the Pink Lady Apples, I'd see them running, and one of them, I say to people, one of them pipped me to the post, and I thought, if you can't beat them, join them. So I then got in contact with Pink Lady Apples and said, look, my name's Sally Orange. I know that you've got the apples. Could I run as an apple? And they agreed. They didn't actually have enough at the time, so they got one made for me especially. And I did the next marathon as an apple. So yeah, that was again just a different way of being able to raise money. And then I went to Afghanistan, and while I was out there, I did one dressed as a banana. Got one sent out, and my friend at the time, she was hoping to get into the Commonwealth Games. I think she did a 2:38 marathon, and I said to her, she said, "Oh, come on!" There was in Bastion, we were doing a marathon, and I went out for a run, and I said, "Look, if I can do 15 miles this weekend, I'll do the marathon." So no training whatsoever. I'm not best known for my training. In fact, I quite often say that training is cheating. And I did that. I said to her, "Look, why don't we both, let's get some banana costumes sent over." So we did, and we did it together, not at her 2:38 pace. And she said to me, Sally, she said, that is the slowest marathon that I've ever done, but it's also the most enjoyable marathon that I've ever done. And we decided that every mile we'd try and come up with a different banana joke. So we'd run past people saying that it was banana split, and that we were going to peel because it was so, sunburn and all those kind of things. So yeah, we just had a really good fun with it. And I kind of realised that it was something quite unique and something different, and that it made people smile. They would see this bright, colourful thing and they'd smile. And then people quite often would say, why are you dressed as an orange, an apple, or a banana? And that's where I started to think, well, I had this mission to want to try and change the conversation, or break the stigma associated with poor mental health. And when I said, I want to break the stigma of poor mental health, people would often say, "Oh yeah, I've had a problem," or "I know someone who's had a problem." And it would just start that conversation in a way that, I think if I had a T-shirt on that said, "Come and talk to me about mental health," I don't think the people who would need to would. Some people would, but it's just a really subtle way of opening up a conversation with people who potentially, will get the benefit from that. And it's just kind of gone from there, really. And I've now run over 80 marathons. So actually on Sunday I did my 83rd marathon, and it was actually my 13th London marathon. And yeah, London Marathon just never fails to lift the spirits of London. Just people coming together, supporting each other. There's literally, all your senses are overloaded. There's people shouting, cheering, and there's even just different smells when you're going past different places of London. There's the people that you see, and it's just it really is an absolutely fantastic event. And it usually takes me about 2 or 3 days to sort of come down from it, because there is so much hype, and people have either gone to watch and support, or on social media they've seen other people doing it, and there's stories on the news. Whereas the other marathons that I've done, people aren't even that, they're not that bothered about them, and even some of those have been.
Oh, she's off for a run again.
Yeah, so and I have now. So after I'd done London, and then I'd done Afghanistan, and I'd been on exercise with the army in America. So I flew over and did the US Marine Corps marathon. I did that one as a watermelon. No other reason that I just got a new fruit costume. And at the end, at the beginning, the day before, at the expo, they've got the watermelon health promotion board there. And I said, do you mind if I have a photo taken here? And they were like, yeah, sure, no problem. So I got my costume out, put it on, and they were like, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm running as this. Like, oh my goodness. And they'd got tops on saying Team Watermelon. So even though I'd gone on my own, I'd got my own support crew there. And then at the end, everybody wants a photo with, a Marine and their medal. I'd got completely the opposite, where I'd got 6 Marines who all wanted their photo taken with me because I was dressed as a watermelon. But at the end, everybody thought that I'd worked for this watermelon company, and they hadn't realised that I'd actually ran the marathon as well. So that was fun. So I'd done 3 continents by then, and so just thought, okay, maybe I should see about doing all of the continents. And before long, I did another one in South America. Did that as a bunch of grapes. And then over in New Zealand, I did one as a kiwi fruit. And I went to Antarctica and got my nice hair out when I was there. And did the Antarctica Marathon dressed as a pear. So that was quite fun. And then realised I was the only person in the world that ran a marathon on every continent dressed as a different piece of fruit. But with this message of just sort of wanting to spread colour and sort of positivity, but also change the conversation on mental ill health at the same time. So, but I've done some quite interesting marathons. So I did one in the London Eye. So during the pandemic, I got a treadmill.
I'm just trying to envisage how you do that.
So I got a treadmill in one of the pods, and I did it to symbolise the highs and lows, or the ups and downs, that the pandemic had on the nation's mental health. So I was in a pod, so like the bubbles that we had, and I could only see people through a screen. And I did it dressed as an orange because I did most of them. But for the London Marathon, they wouldn't count it because it was on a treadmill. And I knew this beforehand. So I had prepared and thought, okay, not a problem. So I went back to my hotel as soon as I'd finished it, put a lemon costume on, set off again around the streets of London, past the bells of St Clement's. So during the day, I'd been oranges and lemons past the bells of St Clement's. And that way, the London Marathon finally gave me a medal, because I could prove that I'd actually done a marathon on street. So I had to do a double marathon for that medal. And then 6 days later, it was World Mental Health Day, and I did the world's deepest underground marathon. We called it Beneath the Surface because you never know what's going on beneath the surface. And it was in a mine up in North Yorkshire. And it was a mile underground. It was very, very dark, very hot, really quite hilly actually as well. And got the Guinness World Record for the world's deepest underground marathon.
I didn't even know they did marathons underground.
Well, it was organised by somebody I knew.
Yeah.
So we kind of came up with the idea, and it went along that way. So
that's just, I mean, the thought process of that. Right, I've done that. Right, underground. Where did that come from?
Just the opportunity came up. I was at the National Fruit Show, and got chatting to this guy and said what I did with the marathons, and he said, "Would you do one underground?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "No, I'm being serious." And I said, "Yeah, so am I. I would do." And so it took about 18 months to set up, to get all the safety, and then obviously COVID hit, and So it was only 6 of us that did it, but yeah, really, really quite different.
Would you do that one again?
Yeah, I would do, definitely. But then after about 50 marathons, someone said to me, "You're completely nuts." And I thought, what a great idea. So I got a nut costume and I had a sign on me that said, "Nuts about mental health. Together we can crack it." And got the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon dressed as a nut. So you could say that I'm a bit fruity and nuts.
Yeah. So, and the Antarctic one, what was that like? I mean,
yeah, it was cold. It was, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, how many people get to go to Antarctica? And it's
not many.
24-hour daylight, so that's quite strange. It's, it was challenging because you didn't want to sweat too much, because if you sweat, then it freezes, so you're at risk there. But it was hard underfoot because you're running on snow, so it's energy sapping. But I did that, and then about 6 weeks later, I actually went to Mongolia and ran across a frozen lake, and I was a bit, thinking, "Oh, I've been to Antarctica, it can't be that cold." I got to Mongolia, oh my goodness, it was so much colder than Antarctica. It was minus 47, but I knew it was going to be cold, so I dressed as a chili pepper, because I thought, well, at least I'll look red hot if I'm freezing cold. So yeah, that was good for it. Except I thought that I was just doing a marathon, and I got there, and it turned out to be 100 miles. And I said, I'm in the wrong place. I said, I thought it was just a marathon. And they said, yeah, that's right. It's a marathon today, and then a marathon tomorrow, and then it's just, it's a marathon today, and then it's an ultra tomorrow and an ultra the next day. Oh, right, okay. So I just thought, what's an extra couple of marathons? So did 100 miles across this frozen lake.
Wow. So I mean, running on ice.
Yeah, no, that was
worse than running on concrete?
That was very different. So that was on ice. So that had to have spikes on your trainers for that one. For the Antarctic marathon, you didn't have to have that, but yeah, for the frozen lake, we did have to. And then actually last year, I took it a bit further and decided to do 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 consecutive days.
How the hell did you manage that?
So,
do you know somebody with a plane?
It was an organised event. It had taken me 4 years to sort of get the funding to be able to go and do it. But this time I knew, again, Antarctica was going to be cold and that was going to be frozen. And because I'd already done every continent as a piece of fruit, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to do every continent as a vegetable. So I set off this time in Antarctica as a pod of peas, because I thought, I'm going to be frozen, I might as well be frozen peas.
Frozen peas.
So I have actually done a marathon in Antarctica, one as fruit and one as vegetables. And I've just, and that was also a bit of a, there was a reason for that, because it was a massive challenge, 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days. And if I failed, I knew that I would beat myself up about it. But this was a way of almost having a safety net, that if I didn't manage that, I'd also started on another project of doing every continent as a vegetable. And Antarctica is the hardest one to get to and the most expensive. So that's why I chose to do it as a vegetable. I didn't do every other marathon on that event in fancy dress, because it was tough, and you went from minus 40 to suddenly plus 40. And, I'd had a lot of people put, a lot of trust in me and hope that I would be able to achieve it. And so I needed to take that a bit more serious. So I did the first one as a pod of peas, and then the final one I did dressed as a slice of orange in Miami, which was hot. It was very, very warm there. But yeah, managed to complete it.
I read somewhere that you'd skied across the Antarctic, or was it the
Yeah,
Arctic?
so I did. It was a 14-day expedition. So I've skied from coast to coast of Svalbard, and also the Finnmark Plateau in Norway, right up in the Arctic Circle. So that was pulling a pulk, all of your kit that you needed, camping for those 14 days, which was a good, great expedition. Again,
Good workout on your legs, that one, then.
great challenge of, but also knowing that you can't compete against the elements. The elements will always win. So you just have to be very sensible in those situations, whether it be the Sahara Desert when I did the Marathon des Sables, of it being in the high 40s, and the challenges that brings on the body. There's also challenges when it's really, really cold as well. So
So what would you say is the hardest one you've done? Because I know the Sahara Desert one, a lot of people say that's just like the ultimate one to compete in or complete.
They do. And again, the brain is very clever at forgetting things. So it might be because that was a longer time ago, but the World Marathon Challenge, where it was a 7 marathon, 7 continents, 7 days, that had all the different time zones. So it was 16 different time zones. And you might, you might have to start the marathon at 4 o'clock in the morning, because if that's when the plane lands, you basically had to run, get on the bus back to the airport, sleep on the plane, but you also needed to eat as well. And it depended how long the flight was. So some flights were longer than others, but you're also having to tell your brain, sleep. You haven't got time to sort of wind down. And then as soon as you get there, off you go again, go and do a run. And that could be in, minus temperatures, plus 40. Then in Brazil, in Fortaleza, it was really, really humid. It was 90% humidity as well. So that was an extra challenge. But each time,
I can imagine that being tough.
Each time I just think, well, sometimes it was at night, so maybe you didn't have the same scenery, but it was cooler. But then in the daytime, you could see things. So there was, again, swings and roundabouts as to when or why. You'd have to just try and look at the positives of the situation. But yeah, that was a pretty big challenge.
That's huge, massive, really.
Yeah, although I've got one in a few weeks' time.
I applaud you.
Thank you. In a few weeks' time. So that was to take the mental health message around the world. And in a few weeks' time, I'm actually going to Everest, and I'm doing the Everest Marathon. So that's to take the mental health message to the top of the world, and really shout about it from there. So that's a trek up to base camp, and then the marathon starts at base camp.
And goes up or down?
Down.
I mean, it can't go up, can it? So yeah, I mean,
it's so from base camp, that's where it starts, and then it's 26.2 miles to Namche Bazaar, which is not exactly down. There's quite a lot of up in that as well.
I was going to say, you're cheating. You're just downhill all the way.
And it's not going to be a fast marathon at all. I think it's a sort of a 10-12 hours sort of thing, and then walk back from there back to Lukla to get the plane again.
You look as though you're looking forward to that one as well.
Well, I'm doing that one I'm going to do it as a slice of lemon on the way up, and then a slice of lime on the way back down, because I'm going to be icing a slice because it's going to be cold. So I'll be icing a slice on that one.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you about or ask you about is you do a lot of like talks for people and stuff like that. How do you find that people react to you when you're doing? I know you've been invited to lectures and you've been invited to, I've seen photos of, with the Prime Minister and royalty and stuff like that. How do you react to that? Because you've been it's the OBE you've got?
MBE.
MBE, sorry, MBE. MBE, that's right. Yeah, I had a CO who got an OBE and he went, I didn't want to be MBE. other buggers' efforts,
Yeah,
my bloody
MBE is
effort.
my bloody efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, getting the MBE, I mean, that must have been a highlight,
it
to
was
say the least.
Yeah, just absolutely. I've never done anything. I've volunteered since I was 16. I didn't start fundraising until I was 34, but I've always volunteered, and it was just something that I enjoyed doing. At school I enjoyed doing it, and then I would go and do, camps with physically disabled people when I was at university in my holidays, and yeah, I've never really thought anything of it. It was just what I enjoyed doing. And back in them days as well, I didn't really tell anyone because you just got on and did it. There was no social media where it was, look what I've done, or so it's just I've just always been a busy person and enjoy being a busy person. I've never been one to sort of sit and watch TV. But yeah, when I got that letter through, I say I got that letter. I didn't. It went to a different address. So I got an email from somebody at that address saying, this letter's arrived for you. So they said, what it said on the envelope. So I Googled, what does a letter from the Cabinet Office mean? Thinking it was a parking fine that I hadn't paid. And that's when it said about the honours. And so when I drove over to actually collect the letter, I had a bit more of an idea that it might be something. And yeah, so it was quite, it was just, I didn't tell anyone that evening. And then the next day I phoned my parents and just sort of said, look, are you both there? Just sit down. This has happened. But what had happened a couple of years before was the university that had turned me down for those 6 years in a row. They actually emailed me and they said, we'd like to offer you an honorary doctorate. So I went back to that university. So Dr. Orange here, forget Dr. Pepper, this is Dr. Orange. And went back to the university and accepted the honorary doctorate.
You've got to bring out a fizzy drink called that, don't you?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have already been tangoed, so
yeah,
they've already got that. So to have that, and so to have gone from a point where I wanted to take my life, and could see no other way, to using the running to sort of help. I still struggle. I'm not gonna say it's all
yeah. It never goes away.
Yeah, I still take medication and I still see a therapist, but I'm absolutely fine with that now. The years that I battled and didn't want to go onto medication because of maybe not being able to get a job, or what people would think of me. No one knows if I take. Well, they do now because I tell them. Because I just think if I tell them and I'm open about it, hopefully if other people need it, they will take it as well. Because I just think, why on earth would I live the life that I was living previously, where I was just trying to get through every day, and for 20 hours of every day, I just wanted to be dead. I didn't want to be here. So the fact that I can get through, and I can actually smile now, and I can have a smile that means that I'm smiling, whereas I was very good at hiding it and pretending that everything was okay. And actually, you didn't need to be with me for long to realise that I couldn't keep that up for a long time. But I would only generally ever go out when I was 95% okay. So, and the rest of the time nobody knew or nobody saw that. Whereas, I'm just more open about it now, and sort of know the things that when I'm starting to struggle, the things that I need to do to help me, and know what they are. So hopefully that will prevent me going into that very, very dark place again.
It's good that, I mean, I'll talk to you after we've done this, because you'll find out in a minute. I mean, to turn your life around like that, is amazing. It really is. Honestly, if I had a hat on, I'd take it off. I really would.
It didn't happen
You know.
overnight. I wouldn't,
No, I know it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a long time,
Yeah,
and a lot of determination on your behalf as well. Not just like like you say, you're on medication. You don't just take medication and you're better. It's a gradual thing.
yeah.
It's still still tough. Honestly, it's come on up to an hour now, so I think we've come to the end of that. Unless
Yeah.
there's anything else you'd like to get across.
I'm very. I suppose one thing is that also came out of being medically discharged from the army, and sort of having that real sense of purpose taken away. I was very fortunate that not long after I'd been medically discharged, I was asked to be the national ambassador for the Army Cadet Corps. So,
oh wow, I didn't know that. Sorry, I didn't know that.
No, it's fine. So it gave me that purpose again, and it gave me the opportunity to still wear the uniform every now and again, but in a way that hopefully inspires young people as well to sort of, first of all, reach out if they have a problem, but to show that I think people meet me and they'll say, you're just very normal, and I am. I just put a different costume on, but the thing that can, embracing that and what it can get other people to bring out of them, in their own. I've just sort of turned something around, and I sort of say to people that if you're given lemons, people are talking about making lemonade. Well, I'm just an orange, so. I very much, when people say to me with a marathon, what time are you going for? I always say the time of my life, because if I'm aiming for a certain time, or if I was aiming for a certain time and I didn't make that time, then I think I would beat myself up about it and call myself a failure. Whereas in actual fact, I'm in control if I have a good time or not. If I say hello to other people, if I look around, or if I help someone. And that for me is so much better than having to go for a specific time.
Yeah, going for a personal best and stuff like that. It's not like you're saying, just out there to enjoy it. You said there that you were medically discharged from the military. How was that?
Oh, it was tough because it wasn't. I fought it and fought it and fought it because I know that, and I think I've proved now that you can still achieve when you have a mental illness, but it just has to be managed correctly. The same as, there's people who damage their ankles or their knees, and they can still stay in the military. I know that not all the time, it depends what job they're doing, but if you're managed correctly, then, and you have people that bring out the best points of you, there are some things that depression would have been really, really helpful with, as in I can recognise it in other people. And by being able to recognise it in other people, you can get them better as well. Whereas if I completely blank it out and say that there's, or didn't have that understanding, then other people go down that slippery slope as well. So I think you can, there's a lot of negatives that you can turn into positives. Sometimes it's harder than others, but that's almost become one of my strengths now, sort of being able to turn it around and help people who are struggling. So there's lots of different things that have come out of it. And even though it was something that I didn't want to do, and I didn't want to leave the military because I'd chosen to do it. I'd chosen to do it on a weekend. I was doing my physio in the NHS, and then at the weekends I was choosing to go and do the reserves, obviously until I was then full time. So this was my hobby and my life taken away, rather than just a job. It was.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what to say to that really, because it's such a life altering thing to happen, really. And sometimes I feel as though the MOD really doesn't care, what happens to people. And as much as it's getting better, and everyone says it is. Now we've got the Veterans Minister and Johnny Mercer and stuff like that. I'll applaud him as much as I can. He's doing a fantastic job from what I can see. But there's a lot of people I've spoken to, and guys in other organisations who I've chatted with, who feel as though it's always that thing that the army's got shot of you. The army doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't care about you anymore. And the way I see it is, well, if I was working for Tesco's and I left Tesco's aren't going to come and chase me and say, "Are you all right?" every day and stuff like that. But then again, you look at it, being in the military is not like working at Tesco's. It's a life. It's a way of life. It took me a long, long time to adjust to not being in the army. And I don't think I ever will. I mean, I don't bang on about it. I don't scream to people, I'm a veteran and stuff like that. But I do still find it strange not being in my military family, because that's what it is, and it's a way of life, and it's hard leaving, but it is what it is in the end, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it is a case of taking the positives and seeing that actually I've probably been able to do a lot that I wouldn't have been able to do within the military. Particularly, I got to the rank of major, and a major running around dressed as a banana didn't always sit right with a lot of people. I don't know why, because you're still a person, and I was trying to get a message across. But actually now I don't have the barriers of people not liking it. If they don't like it, then they can just walk the other way, and I can walk the other way, and it doesn't have to affect me. Whereas if I was still working and I still working within the army, and I had a CEO or somebody who was like, you can't do that, then I don't have a choice. I can't do that. So you're very restricted, and I think that is something that's very different to the military, because it is uniform and everybody needs to be the same as such. So it's worked out okay. It's taken a long time to come to that realization and that point, but it's having to make the best of the situation. I can't change it. I can't go back. But what I hopefully can do is change it for other people, that if they want to stay in, they get the help that they need, and they can then show that they can continue doing what they enjoy doing. So that's what I hope I can change with it.
I mean, it's fantastic work that you've done, and again, I keep saying this all the way through this conversation, but I really do take me out to you. I mean, I sweat standing up. You know what I mean? No matter not doing all that. we're going to come to the close of it now, because it's getting on. You've got the rest of your evening inside as well. But one question: have you done the Great North Run?
I have done the Great North Run. It was my.
That's better than a London Marathon.
That's my very first ever event that I did, was the Great North Run.
The Great North Run.
Yeah. No, it's fabulous.
I want to say I'd attempt it, but only in a car.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. No, Northeast is a great place and very supportive. So yeah.
I mean, I know guys who've done the London Marathon. I know guys who've done the Great North Run, and two very different atmospheres.
Yeah.
I suppose, and I suppose they're a bit biased as well because they're from up here. But they always said that the Great North Run's the place to come, just because of the whole weekend.
Yeah.
The kids run the day before, and the disabled one that happens as well.
Yeah.
And they said it's just the whole weekend's a complete atmosphere. I mean, the Northeast. I mean, I live about 30 mile outside of Newcastle, and the whole place comes to a standstill. People are stood looking up, waiting for the red arrows to fly over and stuff like that for miles. It's just changes the city for the whole weekend.
Yeah.
I imagine the New York Marathon. Have you done that one?
I have, yes, yeah. I did that one as an apple, big apple. I had to do it as an apple. But yeah, I'd say that was my second. That was my second favourite. Is that.
What's your least favourite? I'm going to have to ask that now. You said that was your
least favourite. It was actually during the World Marathon Challenge, and it was Madrid. I just cried from mile 3. It was my fourth one out of 7, and I just cried the whole way because it was around a housing estate. It was 33 laps of a housing estate, a plane had been delayed, and so we weren't in the Formula One racetrack where we were supposed to be, and I was just in pain. My stomach was really sore, and yeah, so that was one.
Oh, I can imagine.
I didn't enjoy.
I'm going to end the recording now. Thanks very, very much for coming on the show and talking about your time in the military and your marathons and your life and your mental health and the help that you're giving other people. Honestly, I applaud you for what you do.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for having me.